started your business, how did it go money-wise? Did you have the money or did you have to get investors?
I'll get to that. So I just kind of want to know what y'all are thinking about, and I'll come to that for sure, definitely. I want to give you a little bit broader background before I do that, if I can.
What were you doing, like, kind of before you,
Okay.
Started your own business,
Okay.
and then what made you want to take that leap of faith?
Okay,
into
cool.
that?
Well, I think you'll hear something.
I'm ready.
You ready? All right. Did you want to talk?
No,
anything
I'm
that's
good, yeah, just you
Okay.
can, yeah.
Okay.
Go.
All right. I'm Trey Jordan, and I'm from Memphis. I'm here since I was 5 years old. My dad always talked to me about running your own business. I mean, constantly would tell me, hey, think about entrepreneurship, think about this. And so when I went off to college, I went to Baylor University. And the reason I went to Baylor University, it was one of the only places in the country at the time that had an entrepreneurship program. Everybody know what that is? It just teaches you how to run your own business, which was fun. And so all through college, I would always start businesses while I was there. And I would create different ways to, how do you make money? And so I used to sell Christmas trees door to door. And so I'd get all my friends together, and we'd go drive off to Dallas, Texas, buy a bunch of 4-foot tall Christmas trees, come to all the young ladies around campus and say, you need to buy a Christmas tree from me. And so they'd buy Christmas trees because they didn't want to be bought humbug. And so that went from there to buying and selling motorcycles. And I used to sell, and I never rode a motorcycle. I don't know how to ride a motorcycle, but I'd buy and sell motorcycles because to me it was the art about the business and not about the motorcycle. And it wasn't about necessarily Christmas trees, but it was about the business of selling and being in business. That takes, marketing, finance, accounting, and all those kind of things. And so that's kind of the story of my college career. Is I did it with hats, I did it with shirts. I always liked to be in business. And so I knew from the very beginning that that's what I wanted to do. My dad was a Wendy's franchisee, Wendy's hamburgers, right? So he was a Wendy's franchisee. I grew up at our dinner table. I could tell you about, food seemed like all day long because that's what we talked about around the table. And so often we get into families and we get into businesses based on our family background because, they're talking about the various things that they do. And so, so I think that I kind of always gravitated toward the restaurant business. And my dad owned Waco, Temple, Killeen, Georgetown, Round Rock, Texas, a franchise of about 15 stores. And while I was in Texas at college, when he owned those stores, we also opened a pizza restaurant, and he had me do all the marketing for the pizza restaurant. So that was while I worked in the restaurant, for years growing up, and I always knew how to do that. I got my first chance to kind of start a restaurant from scratch and see how it did. And you know how it did? Terrible. It failed, and we closed it down. And the problem was the food wasn't any good. So my dad used to tell a story about that, he was selling dog food back in his day, and they weren't selling any dog food. And so the comment about the dog food was, why didn't you sell any dog food? They said the dogs didn't like it. And so that's where you don't sell pizza because people didn't like it. So that's pretty important in the restaurant business. So I really thought that I was always going to go work for my dad with Wendy's. And that was kind of my dream job. I was going to go work for my dad. And he comes to me in end of my junior year and said, son, I got to tell you something. We had to file bankruptcy. And I went, whoa, that's not what I was expecting. That wasn't on my horizon. And he goes, you better get out of school. You better figure out what you're going to do. And I did not have a plan. My plan was, Dad, this is what I was going to do. And so I had to create a new plan for myself. Okay, what does this mean to me? And so I was an entrepreneurship major, but I was also a minor in real estate. And so I got into real estate. And I'm going to tell you, I'll fast forward to this story about my dad because it's important. But I went to real estate. I came back to Memphis, Tennessee. I was in commercial real estate for 5.5 years. I'm a sales guy by nature. I like meeting people. I love to meet people. So the restaurant business fits me well. The sales business fits me well. And so I'm out there working real estate, doing well, and it's been fun. And my dad comes up to me and says, "Hey, you want to come back to work for me?" So remember, 6 years previously, he had just filed bankruptcy. He told me I better get out of school and figure out what I wanted to do. But he dug in deep, and he actually won the Franchisee of the Year for Wendy's 6 years later, or seven, I think it was 7 years later, because he invited me to come work for him, and I got to work with him while he was winning the Franchisee of the Year for all of Wendy's on a national basis. He actually had the highest volumes, I think it was west of the Mississippi River. I mean, it was huge volumes in his restaurants. And so I learned a lot of the good about restaurants, right? And the bad about the restaurants. I mean, there's some tough stuff about the restaurant business. So my dad was a Harvard Business School graduate, and he's a guy that is a voracious reader and business guy. He's a consummate business guy. And I would encourage you guys to do this as you're thinking through what do I want to do. When you see an article or something you are interested in, pull it out and put it in a file. Start pulling it out and put it in a file. Things that are interest me. And when I went to go work for him, he gave me a stack, no kidding, this tall, and said, "Trey, I want you to come work for Wendy's with me." And I said, "Dad, my wife won't move. I was just married. My wife won't move to Waco, Texas." Who would move to Waco, Texas? Why would you move to Waco, Texas? And he said, "Okay, you don't want to move to Waco, Texas. Research all these and tell us what business we're getting into together." And I went, wow. And so I'm getting all these businesses, and I'm thinking, what in the world am I going to do? We researched everything. He said, whatever you do, don't get in the restaurant business, but research all these. So I looked at oil change, wasn't all that interested. Cash checking or check cashing business. We didn't get into that. Looked at a lot of them, but what we ended up getting into was Holiday Deli and Ham Company. Anybody know Holiday Deli and Ham Company here in town? Okay, people call it Holiday Ham. Okay, we've got 3 locations around town, and what my dad was telling me is he said, when you think about a business in this big stack, always think about how to be in a business that might get bought out by somebody else. Get in the way of progress. He said, try to get in the way of progress. And so, as I was researching all these, I came across this ham company, this small ham company in Jackson, Mississippi. And I go, man, I'm going to research that. So I started looking at it. And what I found out was that they didn't have anything to really sell me. I was going, well, why would I buy what are they selling me? I can't figure it out. But in my research, I found a lawsuit. And man, research, I know, I should have said this to begin with. You know why I'm in the restaurant business? Because I don't like doing all of this. I don't like sitting in a classroom. I like moving. I like interacting with people. But the research is so important. You can't begin to imagine how important the research side of your business is. So in that research in that ham store out of Jackson, Mississippi, I found a lawsuit a national lawsuit against Honey Baked Ham. In that lawsuit, it gave me all the sales volumes of Honey Baked Ham. And I went, you gotta be kidding me, they're doing that much? They have no competition. There's zero competition in Memphis, Tennessee to sell spiral sliced honey glazed hams. Dad, that's the kind of business we're in, we need to get into. So in 1993, we started a Holiday Ham, okay? It was called Holiday Ham and Turkey at the time. So the first year was awesome. We got into the business, and I didn't know anything about the restaurant business except selling pizzas and working at Wendy's. I mean, that's all I knew. Really didn't know anything, but I knew how to sell. And so we were selling hams. I was literally selling hams door to door, kind of, if you will, going banging on companies and saying, hey, will you buy my ham, whatever. And so as we were doing that, November was great, December was great, but what happens in a ham store in January? Nothing. There's no sales of ham in January. So I said, man, this isn't going to work very well. What do we got to do? And so the other thing I would tell you, a key thing about being in business for yourself, the restaurant or otherwise, be adaptable. Figure out how to adapt. And so I started thinking about this. I go, okay, this isn't working. We need to add a restaurant component. And so what we did, I tell people all the time who aren't from Memphis, who don't know who we are, and how many of y'all didn't know of Holiday? There was a few of y'all? Okay, for sure. No, I'm kidding. So it's honey baked ham meets Panera bread. That's essentially what Holiday was back in the day. So, all right, now for cookies. You ready? All right. How many different kinds of restaurant businesses are there? Like stylistically, categorically. How many different restaurant styles are there? And you know this, you know at least one of them, because you say it all the time. And you don't even know you say it.
Oh, what you got? Fine dining.
I love it, love it. All right, fine dining. All right, go get you a brownie or cookie. You got fine dining. All right, who else?
Casual dining.
Okay. All right, get yourself a cookie or brownie.
Fast food.
Fast food, that's one you say all the time. All right, I got,
Would it, like, I know there's themed restaurants, it's like themed dining.
yeah, that generally falls in one of these categories.
What about family dining, like family dining?
Okay, so in the restaurant business, we tend to categorize that in one of these buckets. Like, go get yourself a cookie and brownie for trying, yes, but go, please, go get it. All right, who else wants to try